Okay, good day, everybody. Thanks very much for joining us. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Peter Llewellyn. I run the services at MedComsNetworking.com and the associated services around that. So the idea is I'm providing information services activities. I'm championing the MedComms business across the globe. We have a global community there. And by that, I'm talking specifically medical communications, medical education, medical publishing. So anybody who's in that business or interested in coming into that business, hopefully will find useful information at medcomsnetworking.com and the associated web services of one sort or another. In particular, one of the things that I've been doing for the last few years is shouting a bit about MedComms to people who aren't in MedComms and telling them it's a wonderful career. And there's a website at FirstMedCommsJob.com where you can find lots of insights into the business. You can find careers guides, you can find careers events and such like. So one of the things we're doing at the moment, we're running these Zoom meetings, which is a great way of extending our reach to people all over. You can obviously dial in from wherever you are. I can ask specialists, experts and guests to come in from wherever they are. And it means we can engage a whole bunch of people very easily. And then in an hour's time, we can all go back to work. Okay, so today I'm delighted to be joined by Ben and Alice and Charlotte, who are three of the account management types, can I call you that, who have been profiled in the most recent edition of our Account Managers Careers Guide, which everyone can find on FirstMedCommsJob.com. But I thought it'd be fun to get, in this case, three of them to come online, talk about themselves and their lives in account management, and talk to us a little bit about day-to-day working, training opportunities, how to get into the job and so on. So this is very much about trying to have a conversation with those of you who are online at the moment. So do be ready to ask some questions. But first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to run around the three of them and ask them to introduce themselves. So Ben, you're first up. Can you switch back on and talk to us about yourself for a couple of minutes? You're muted, Ben.
Sorry about that, I was muted on both. Hi everyone, I'm Ben Church and I'm an account executive at Oxford PharmaGenesis. My journey into MedComms pretty much started at university. I have a psychology background from the University of Leicester and I had a fantastic time there, had a really good 6 months in a lab as well, which was a great experience. Came out of university not knowing exactly what I wanted to do. I knew that I really enjoyed the science and that was something I did want to keep touch with. So I came out, had a really, really difficult time searching around for jobs. I took quite a few months out to have a look around. Eventually ended up having a conversation with one of my friends who'd just taken a job as a senior medical writer at another agency. And from everything she told me, it just sounded like a really, really fantastic, interesting career. And she told me a little bit more about account management as well. And I sort of took a deep dive after that into a lot of the resources that Peter has mentioned, such as the guide. I went to one of Peter's career events as well, which was a really, really good opportunity to get to speak to a load of agencies, find out more about MedComms and like specific agencies in general. And after that, I submitted my CV to Oxford PharmaGenesis, heard back pretty much immediately, to be honest. This was all within like a couple of weeks of each other from the event to walking in for my first interview. So I went in there, had a really, really nice conversation with my colleagues, Gary and Yasmin. And then shortly after that, received a job offer. And yeah, I think I'm coming up to my first year in MedComms in March, so I'm a month or so off. And it's just been fantastic. Like Oxford PharmaGenesis has been a brilliant place to work so far. The thing that struck me most is the culture. Everyone's so helpful, like always willing to sort of take time out to really listen to you and sort of work on your development. There's been a load of opportunities that I've been offered over this past year, and I've been lucky enough to work across so many different accounts with so many different deliverables. I'm really sort of dipping my toe in the water of each pool, as it were. Yeah, that's pretty much my story. Hopefully another few years in front of me.
Excellent. Okay, and just very, very briefly, Oxford PharmaGenesis. So there's a few hundred of you, privately owned. You've got offices in. Just a couple of words just about.
Exactly, yeah. So we're an independently owned health science communications consultancy. We've got 4 offices. How many offices have we got now? We've got a couple of offices in Oxford. One sort of really nice out in the sticks in the countryside, and we've got one in Oxford Central, which is where I am now. We've got an office in Philadelphia and an office in Melbourne, both of which are rapidly growing, and there are opportunities to sort of go between offices as well. And yeah, as you said, I think around 250 people now we've reached. So rapidly growing, but still sort of medium-sized.
Okay, and for completeness, I hope I'm not going to get this wrong, London, Cardiff.
Sorry, London and Cardiff as well.
Cambridge is coming, yeah?
Cambridge, we have a very small office in Cambridge that is growing as well, yeah.
Okay, just useful to give us a little bit of context here because the three agencies are all quite different. So thank you, Ben. Alice, you're next on our alphabetical list, so over to you.
Okay, so I'm Alice Fantom, and I'm account exec at Envision Pharma Group based in Wilmslow at the moment. So I'll just give you a brief overview of my journey. So my journey started with my biomedical science degree, which I did for 4 years with a year in industry. So that was academic research. And then I went on to do a master's, which again was in biomedical science, but it had an oncology focus and again was very academic research based. So straight after that, I was dead set on a PhD and I put in loads of applications. I pretty much spent the whole year of my master's applying and going for interviews. And then I finally got offered one at the University of Liverpool. And I was going straight in, everything was fine. And then I suddenly realised that this is not what I wanted to do. I sort of reflected back. I think once you take a minute to stop and look at where you're going, it's like, oh, maybe this isn't for me. So I had to go back to the drawing board, which is quite unnerving, especially when you think you've got a clear path. So I knew that I needed to use my scientific background. I've been so involved with it for most of my life, very interested in it. And I needed something that was fast paced, something that kept me on toes. So I did a lot of online research, which is where I came across account management and MedComms. So I was looking at the writing roles as well, but I decided that account management would be for me. I quite like people, I like organising things. So that's why I decided on that. But then I also found the role of project assistant at Envision Pharma Group. So I just thought this is an entry level role, and I thought this would be a good introduction of what MedComms in, because I think you don't really know what it is exactly until you go into it. So I thought it'd give me a good overview. So I got that role and I started. So when I started, my time was split 50-50 between supporting our office manager, which was a really great introduction to our offices and getting to know people. But also I was supporting one of our key accounts. So logistical support across all the projects and sort of planning and getting to know the account a little bit and what we do and the work that we carry out. And then I started to own my own projects. And then, yeah, and it's all sort of escalated from there. So now I'm an account exec, so I got promoted last year. So that's where I am.
Again, sorry, can you just give us a flavour of Envision as a company?
Yeah, so we're a MedComms agency, and we specialise in med affairs strategy through technology and med affairs. So we're a global company at the moment. We've got an office in Wilmslow, which is where I'm based, an office down in Horsham and Bishop Stortford, and I think we've got a couple of freelancers based around the country, especially with like a focus in Glasgow at the moment. And then we've got 3 offices in the US, Australia and also Japan. And then more recently, we've got offices in Serbia and Hungary as well.
Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Thank you, Alice. Cheers. Charlotte,
Hi.
over to you.
Thank you. Okay, so yeah, I'm a senior scientific project leader at Helios Medical Communications, based in our Alderley Park office in Cheshire, and we also have another office down in Witney in Oxfordshire as well. My background is in academia, so I completed a bachelor's degree in biomedical science at the University of Sheffield. Following that, I completed a PhD in behavioural neuroscience at the Institute of Molecular and Cellular Biology in Singapore. And it was when I was nearing the end of my PhD that while I still loved the science aspect, I knew that long term I didn't want to run a lab. So I needed to look at alternative career paths there outside of postdoc. So when I returned to the UK, I actually liaised with a recruitment agency, provided my background, and they said, what about MedComms? You sound perfect for that. So they actually offered me 2 interviews at 2 different agencies, one being a small startup and the other being a larger independent, a larger agency. I chose to interview with the former, was lucky enough to get the job of a scientific project coordinator at Helios, and that was almost 4 years ago now. So it's been great. I haven't looked back since. A quick overview on Helios. It was started in 2015. There's about 100 of us now. It's coming up to 5 years old. Our Oxfordshire office opened in 2015. So no, just a great team, and just growing constantly. So yeah, great environment within Helios.
Excellent. Okay, so that's the three of you and your three companies. And just as a general comment, I mean, and it's worth just making it that, you know, and part of the point I've tried to force you to sort of say those few words, as it were, is, you know, you'll find lots of different MedComms agencies. They can be very different. And, you know, people can think, oh, I'm going to go into MedComms, I want to be an account exec or whatever, and think it's just like this one little box or something. But actually, as hopefully we'll explore a little bit more, the roles can be quite different, but the companies can be very, very different. Whether you're part of a big communications group or whether you're a small privately owned, you know, whether the owner sits in the corner and watches across the top of his or her partition, or whether you've got some much bigger corporate affair. So it can be quite different. So as someone wanting to come into the business, you want to try and think about those sorts of issues and where you want to sit. Yeah. Let's just kick off with an obvious. So let me just say to those of you who are listening to us online, please, the whole point is now to be led by your questions and comments. So you've got a chat button and a Q&A button at the bottom of your screens. Either way is fine. We'll see the questions, we'll pick them up, and we'll weave those into the conversation. Let's just start with, I don't know how difficult this question is going to be, but let's have a go at it anyway. We have got in front of us, I'm sure I'm right, but correct me if I'm wrong, Ben, BSc, Alice, Masters, Charlotte, PhD. Big question all the time in and around MedComms, do I need a PhD to get into MedComms? And particularly on the writing side, there is definitely certainly a bias that way in terms of how many people actually come into the business, although the reality is you don't need a PhD. But just, can each of you just talk a little bit from your own experience? And I'm going to start with you, Ben. You've got enough experience now. You know, you came in the BSc. Any problems not having postgraduate type degrees? Do you see people around you who have got postgraduate type qualifications? Just give us a little bit of a flavour of how important it might have been or wasn't to you getting the job.
I think it's a really good question, and something that does come up quite a lot. Personally, for me, I found that it hasn't affected me. I haven't felt that it's affected me in any way or held me back from doing anything. I think predominantly a lot of the account managers I work with do have BScs. But yeah, I think obviously it's a great thing to have, and it will give you maybe that little bit of a step up in terms of understanding the content and understanding the sort of area a little bit more. But no, as long as you're someone that's willing to learn and the area of MedComms and pharma excites you, there's absolutely no reason you have to have even a scientific background. I think there is precedent for people coming in with not specifically scientific backgrounds as well. So no, just enthusiasm and a willingness to learn.
Excellent. Go on then. I'm just going to try. I don't want to put words in your mouth. So Alice, just pick that one up and go from, as an MSc, have you found that useful or not?
Yeah, it's useful for me, and it allows me to do tasks that I probably wouldn't normally be able to do. So in my first year, I did Congress coverage. So went to a Congress and went to all the presentations that were key for our client, and we put that into reports. So that's helpful with sort of going into the grey area and completing tasks that could be either completed by writers or account managers, but I would say it's absolutely not a necessity. So in our company, we're probably about 50-50, so people with scientific backgrounds and others with not. Some people are from marketing background.
Just to cut in there, you're talking about 50-50 on the account management side?
Yes, on the account management side, yeah. Yeah, so we've got people from marketing backgrounds, English backgrounds, and I think that's quite helpful to have that variety, because people come at things from different angles and approach things slightly differently. So I'd say it's absolutely not a necessity, but it does help me.
Excellent. Okay, Charlotte, you're the PhD.
Yes. Do I think it's helped me? I think doing a PhD, obviously you have a lot of experience with regard to time management, as you have to manage certain projects over an extended amount of time, and that's really key for you to make sure that you deliver on time. So I think it has helped me in one sense, but do I think it's a necessity? Absolutely not. Obviously, from a writing perspective, a lot of the team do have PhDs, but some of the best people on our editorial team do not have PhDs, they're MScs and BScs. But I just think it does help from a management perspective. Obviously, when you have lots of things going on and lots of experience, it will be helpful with coordination, but you can get that from a BSc, you can get that from your placements. As Ben mentioned, he did a 6-month placement. So I think you can gain those skills easily elsewhere. So Yeah.
Okay. Let's just pursue this one a little bit further in this direction. So Charlotte, again, correct me if I'm wrong on anything that I say here, but you have a little bit of a hybrid role, don't you? You do writing and account project management.
I do, yeah. So we have an entry role at Helios called a scientific project coordinator. So as you mentioned, it's supposed to be a hybrid role from medical writing and then also project management as well. So the ratio at that entry level is about 70% project management and then 30% writing. But and then you can pick and choose whether you want to go fully project lead or if you want to transition to the writing side. I've really kept that hybrid role as I've come up through Helios. So it's probably around a 50-50 split if I keep it. So yeah.
Okay, and again, just as a general point, people, and there's some comments coming in. You know, somebody said, I thought MedComms was just about medical writing. It was all right. I didn't think there was a bigger picture. So let's just have a little bit of a couple of minutes on the context we're talking about. So you've got Charlotte as a bit of a hybrid. Alice and Ben, I'm guessing you're well, I know you're account management as opposed to writing. So I'm trying to get over the idea that this is not absolutely necessarily siloed type activity. So you don't sit in one end of the building or a corner and just relate to a writer on the other end or something like that. But in some companies, it is to a degree siloed. And in some companies, it's very mixed up. Okay, so let's just try and get a bit of a flavour. And Alice, let's just go to you in somewhere like Envision. You're on the account management side, not the writing side. So there are other writers, and you liaise with them and support them. And what are the sort of tasks you do that supports them that might sort of explain the difference between account management and the writing side?
So on account management, so we are responsible for developing the budgets and the proposals. So that just outlines the scope of a project, so what we'll actually be carrying out in a project, and that gives the writers sort of a basis to go off. So it'll obviously be discussed with the client beforehand, and the writers will be involved in that, and then it will go into the scope of work, but it does give them a basis. We also develop sort of timelines and tracking documents so that the writers know what they need to be doing and when, and we support with liaison with the client and managing client expectations and just things like that.
Okay, and Ben, would you concur with all of that, or is there anything else from Oxford PharmaGenesis side you'd add into that part?
No, pretty much exactly how Alice outlined it. The only thing I would say is that this whole thing is a collaborative team effort. So we are very much working very closely with the writers. Client calls are sort of, there's writers and accounts people in there, and you're sort of talking about it from both sides. And as I said, yeah, everything's a collaborative effort. They get their input into schedules and if there's any sort of hours for finances and stuff like that.
Okay, and again, let's just make sure, or let's try and make it clear to people, because there's a tendency with these sorts of things to talk account management, writing. So the first point is it's not quite as clear cut as that, but also that's not the only two roles around, is it? So, but it does vary amongst the agencies. So have you all got specialist editors, for instance? Are you all going to nod your head at that, Charlotte? I don't know whether you've got an editorial department as such.
We do have an editorial department.
Okay. So you've got specialist editors in there, and that's another entry route in, yeah. And you'd have creative people probably, and you'd have people who run more the event side maybe. So there's different people doing different things in there, designers, creatives, productions, and so on. And then you've also got the finance, admin, and so on. So we're talking about businesses that have to do there's a number of roles to be played. And MedComms is at its heart about content and delivering content, but a whole bunch of people around that, and you guys have a very important role in making sure it happens right. Having said that, and a question came up at a recent meeting, which took me slightly by surprise, but let's just deal with it as a useful question. The person asking the question wanted to know what sort of financial qualifications they needed in order to do an accounts job, as it were. Can you just briefly? I don't know whether we need all of you to answer that, but Ben, I'm going to look at you. I'm going to pick you at random here. Ben, how much financial training have you got? I mean, that took me by surprise. So just explain why it took me by surprise, maybe.
That is a good question. I personally have absolutely no financial training coming into this. I have since in the past year I've been here, I've obviously had a lot. There's really been a fantastic support network from the managers and from the directors of sort of teaching you how to do things when you get here. And I think everyone has a sort of specific way of doing things anyway. So no, I don't think any qualifications are necessary. Obviously they might be useful. But I think you can learn as much.
I guess the point is you're not the financial managers.
No.
You are managing the budgets for projects, yeah?
Yes.
So
correct.
you have to
So
have an ability to add up numbers and keep an eye on that sort of thing, but you're not sitting there doing P&Ls for people.
Yeah, I guess the easiest way to explain it would be we're sort of managing the finances of the projects, but then the sort of company finances is being managed by our own finance department. So they're sort of overseeing everything as opposed to we're seeing individual project finances.
Excellent. Okay. And unless anybody wants to say anything, I think that's probably dealt with that question. But Alice, you're happy with that. Okay. So let's just have a look. There's a couple of questions. Some of these questions are going to get a bit too specific. So if I ignore them, please forgive me. We can come back to it later on maybe. But some of them might be a little bit too specific for a discussion like this. Okay. But let's talk a little bit about the interview processes. You all said a little bit about your own experiences. What is the usual interview process? Can it be summed up quite simply? You're presumably going to, so one question is, where do you go to look for these jobs? Anybody want to pitch in with that? How do you know there are jobs in the first place?
I use LinkedIn and also your Pharma Network site. So that's how I research online. I don't know if anyone wants to add to that.
And that would be a general point from everybody. Everyone's nodding. I'll have to have my own little plug here. We are the biggest resource of jobs and information and all the rest of it in this specialist business. So hopefully people will come in and find that sort of information. But it's also very true to say, an important point to say, that as a rule, generally, the recruitment consultants don't get very involved at an entry level. So if you're knocking on the doors of the recruitment consultants, I hope they'll be helpful. Some of them will have the odd job or two, but most people will come in directly. So you need to make contact with the people at an agency directly, and you can look at their websites. So if jobs aren't advertised on my boards or whatever, go and look at the individual websites and have a look at what's available, or apply on spec, because everyone's sort of looking all the time, mostly at the moment, for good people. Yeah, and then you're going to go through an interview process, which I guess will vary a little bit. And these days it might be Skypes or whatever. But just out of interest, the three of you, in your experiences, did you go through much testing? Did you have a sort of a rigorous testing process? Charlotte, you're nodding your head. So what happens? What happens at Helios?
Yeah, no, I wouldn't say it's rigorous per se, but we do have quite high standards. So a writing test will go out for you to complete offline. So that might be it might be writing an abstract, and it might be, or a newsletter or something like that. That will then be sent to us. We'll then review it, and if we feel like it's of an adequate standard, you'll be invited for interview. You'll then come to the offices. You'll meet a wide lots of members of the team. So it'll be actually people you're working with. It might be the writers, it might be project leads, it will be the directors, and depending on your job, it might be the graphics team or the finance team as well. And then we do actually do a couple of writing tests on site as well. So that might be an editorial test, whereby you're given an abstract or an excerpt, and you're expected to review it from an editorial perspective. It might be a roles and responsibilities test. So it might be you've got a certain activity, and it would be in what does the project lead do in this instance? What does a project coordinator do? What do you think a medical writer does, and a scientific director? And then so we'll review that internally. We'll discuss internally the feedback from the team, and then an offer may or may not go out after that.
Okay, and we should say, again, that's reflecting the sort of the hybrid nature of the role that we're talking about in Helios, yeah? So I'm guessing, but correct me if I'm wrong, Alice, if we talk to you on the account management side, you wouldn't be going through, I would guess, those sorts of, or at least as many of that sort of writing, testing and editorial type work. Was there anything slightly different about your sort of interview process?
So I didn't have a writing test. I did have a test that I needed to do. It was just to provide like a quick summary of MedComms, which was reviewed by my interviewees, and that was offline. And then I also had a conversation with HR before that test, just as a bit pre-screening and to discuss about the role and check that it's what you want to do, and they tell you a bit about the companies. And then I also had a face-to-face interview. So it wasn't editorial and writing tests at all, really.
Okay, and that's, that I find those sorts of things are interesting. And if you're going for a writing job, you would be getting writing tests. There's no doubt about that. It's less clear cut on the
Yeah.
account management side, and depends a little bit about the hybrid nature and so on. But at the end of the day, people are looking for people who can communicate, and you still need to be able to write an email to the client, or you still need to be able to write a proposal. Although, I mean, it might sound stupidly flippant or whatever, but you still need to be able to spell properly and communicate properly and professionally and all the rest of it. So there will be an element of, you know, if nothing else, they're looking at your CV, your letters, and emails to look for that sort of thing. Because if you haven't got attention to detail and you can't communicate, you're not going to get very far just because you're not a writer. That's not. So Ben, anything that you would want to add to that? Did you have to, Ben, did you have to stand up and give a presentation or something? I mean, account management might be more about presenting stuff, maybe. So was that, some people make people stand up and give presentations?
So there was no presentation. It was slightly different to what Alice and Charlotte have already said. So I came in for my interview, and towards the end of the interview, I'd already done sort of an hour's worth of talking. I was asked to do a sort of editorial test and a maths test, but it's nothing to be worried about at all. They're not trying to catch you out, or they're just trying to, I think on your CV, pretty much everyone would say, you know, got attention to detail. This is the type of value, like the type of traits that people have when they're coming into MedComms. And I think they're just sort of trying to just say, yep, okay, this person can do this. It's not trying to check you know, you can do any more than you need to.
Okay. And certainly in my experience, I mean, one day I'll be caught out by this, but my experience is most MedComms agencies are not trying to catch people out. You don't tend to get the sort of the interview games that you hear about in other businesses and things. It's a little bit more straightforward. Having said that, they are quite fussy. So the message to wannabes is make sure that your email is addressed correctly and spelled correctly, and your letters and your CVs and all that sort of thing, because you guys are very, very fast at just going, they've got my name wrong or something, bang, out the window sort of thing. They haven't got the attention to detail. Once you get in, what sort of training do you get? Let's just talk briefly, because I suspect in the three companies it'll be a little bit different. So I don't know, I've lost track of my order. So Alex, I'm going to start with you. What sort of training? How much is on the job? How much is this formalized training within the company? How much of it is being sent on external courses? Do you get training? We've got a question, I think it's Claire here. Do all the agencies represented give appropriate training for inexperienced applicants? I presume what she means is to people who are at entry level. I don't suppose she means training for the applicants. She means training for the entry level staff. So just give us a little bit of flavour of what sort of training is on offer once you come in, or are you just hung out to dry?
No, you're absolutely not hung out to dry. So I would say it was sort of 80% on the job training, 20% formal training. So they will build up your experience gradually. So say for example with like client calls, first of all you'd start by taking minutes just to get a grasp of what happens and the structure of client calls, and then eventually as you build up your confidence, you start to speak and give brief status overview to the clients, and then eventually taking leads. So I'd say it was sort of that kind of structure, so sort of building up experience gradually until you're fully fledged and you can fly. So yeah, it's that. And then also formal training. So I had formal finance training, which I think is quite important, but I'd say that was still 50-50. So also trying it out and getting the formal training. I think on the job training is possibly the most important form of training. I think that's where you really start to build up your knowledge and learn the most. So yeah.
Okay, thanks. We sent out, unless I missed it, we sent out on many external courses?
So no, we haven't done any external courses.
Okay.
At the moment, no.
So it's in-house.
Yeah,
all
in-house
on
training.
the job, but there's some formalised training, and you're getting lots of support from more experienced people around you.
Yeah.
At every level, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Charlotte, I'm going to go this way around. Charlotte, in Helios, how does it get handled?
Yeah, sure. So similar to Alice, there's a lot of internal training at Helios. So first of all, you will obviously have the induction to Helios as a whole. So how we actually internally do our different processes and what platforms, etc., we use for certain things. And then your training might be client specific. So it might also be whatever platforms they use, but we also do finance training, meeting specific training. So a process for advisory boards or symposia or things like that. We also do a lot of compliance training, actually, because that's a big role within meetings, etc., for MedComms. So we have an external partner who we have annual updates with regard to compliance training as the ABPI and everything changes quite regularly. So that's one thing we keep on top of. We also do quite a lot of external training as well. So it might be effective communication for people who are entering, and then it depends on your level. So we also do training such as line management and things like that. So we do quite a lot internally as well. And if there's certain things that we feel like that we can roll out internally, we will hold ad hoc training. So it could be on, it might be more writing specific, but it's always good to know publication process, so learning the compliance about that, and then just certain projects. So no, quite a lot of internal training and a lot of support provided. And as Alice mentioned, quite a lot is provided on the job, and then also on site as well when you're at specific meetings, for example.
Okay, Ben, again, can you pick up on that and go a little bit, what happens within Oxford PharmaGenesis? How formalised is the training?
Absolutely, yeah. So I remember the first couple of weeks I was here, I think there was quite a lot of sort of induction and formal training. And I think after a couple of weeks, it's very much a conversation here. It's where do you feel like you would like to be trained? Where do you feel like you would like the support? The internal sort of more structured training sessions are there if you want to. Personally, I was chomping at the bit to get started with client work. And I felt that I was trusted to do that. And again, the support was around me to have that sort of on-the-job training. So I think, as Alice and Charlotte both said, it was more of an on-the-job training split, probably 80-20. But you can request certain types of training. You can, those meetings are there for you if you want to take them. Okay.
Let's just ask a blunt question. Why not? Because it might get a couple of minutes of interesting discussion. So, and it'll cover off some of the points that are coming up. So, how difficult are the clients? Who wants to? And how are you handling that and supported in handling that? This is a client. Obviously, you're working in agencies, working for clients is an important point that people need to grasp, yeah? If we haven't already covered that off or made it obvious. And you guys are tending to be the main client contact people. So, okay, which order should we go in? Ben, I'm going to start with you. So just give us a sense of dealing with clients, dealing with difficult clients, because there's always going to be some. And not too much detail here, but just what sort. Again, it's emphasising. I suppose what I'm trying to do is emphasise the support you get. You're not simply left dealing with a difficult client on your own, but just try and paint a little bit of a picture of what can crop up in a typical day.
It's a good question, and I think difficult clients kind of captures quite a few instances. Personally, I've not had anyone like specifically rude to me or anything like that. That's incredibly rare. What tends to be the case is that our clients are incredibly busy people. So it's making sure that we are effectively communicating with them and that we're getting the feedback that we need as well. In terms of support network around me, as you said, you're never going to be left on your own to deal with any sort of issues or difficult situations that will arrive. Everything's a conversation. If you don't know how to deal with something personally, there are going to be people around you that can help you out. So yeah, I think I've never really felt like I'm in a situation where I'm just like, oh God, what do I do here? Like it's me versus this person kind of thing. If there's an issue, you talk with your team, you sort it out. You can jump on the phone with the client, have a discussion as a team, have those people around you if you need them.
Okay, cool. Without repeating everything, because some of this will repeat, but Charlotte, let's come to you next. I mean, and maybe one of the things I'm also trying to emphasize here is it's deadline driven. If the conference is going to, happen next week, it's going to happen next week. If there's stuff that's got to be done, it's got to be done. If the client's very busy, like Ben's saying, then maybe things get a little bit stressful. Yes, can you paint a little bit of a picture? Maybe talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. I actually might be a bit of an outlier here, but I actually quite enjoy challenging clients because I just see it as a great learning opportunity, and I've encountered a few. So I think what you've also got to realise is that everybody has different styles. So you're always going to encounter someone who may be challenging at some point in your career. And actually, it's probably better to encounter that early so that you have that experience and then you can learn to adapt to it as well. I think it can also be quite refreshing, as sometimes you can approach a project in a specific way, and actually having someone challenge you might open your eyes to doing something a little bit differently, and it might optimize it. I think there's two aspects as well, is that challenging can either be, as Ben mentioned, you can have someone who's super busy and won't respond to your calls. They could be incredibly laid back, or they could also be the other end of the scale and be incredibly high maintenance and be sending you lots and lots of emails. So I think you can have challenges from both aspects, and just make sure that you tailor your approach. I mean, if a deadline's coming up, one would hope that we could timelines are always key, that I think Alice mentioned earlier, just to make sure that you've got those deadlines in place. Always make sure you have a little bit of leeway either side so that you can be a little bit flexible. But I think trying to build that rapport with a client and also that trust so that you can give them honest feedback as well, as in someone might come in with a challenging request and you could be like, this is the honest truth that we need it by this time to be able to deliver it effectively. So I think really trying to build a rapport with the client and then having that relationship that you can have that honest exchange as well is really helpful.
Excellent. Go on, Alice. Have you got anything to add to that?
No, my only thing to add is that so we work with the same clients for an extended period of time. So you spend a lot of time sort of getting to know them, getting to know their working styles, which can often be the most challenging part of the job. So it's never really a surprise. So it's just working around them and finding the way that they work and how you can get the best out of them, and then that tends to overcome the main challenge with our clients.
Okay, cool. And I'm going to say this rather than ask it as a question, although if you disagree with me, say so. But I'm more looking for nods. The other aspect of that sort of question is, remember, you're dealing with a team of people internally, writers, editors, creatives, whatever. They can be quite challenging as well. Should we just say that? It's a team. The idea is, it's important. You're not working on your own. You've got the support all the time, but it's people all around you. You might have external opinion leaders or whatever it is. So this is a business where you have to be able and confident and want to engage with people, and to some extent, as Charlotte's saying, enjoy the sorting it out type aspects of it. Is that all fair? Is everyone just going to nod at me? Which is all I really want you to do. Okay. Now, I have got one eye on the clock, because as always, the time sort of clicks by here. What I'd like to, for the moment, we've talked a lot about getting into the business, and not, in fairness, maybe not so much about what you actually do on a day-to-day business. So maybe we'll have to have another webinar about that, although I would say there's a lot on FirstMedCommsJob about that. But maybe if I can just wrap up this part of the session, which is the recorded part, can I ask you each whether you've got a tip or two that you can hand over with a particular eye on, or thinking about, if you were talking to yourself before you came into the business, what would you like to have heard? What might have helped you? What could you get on your CV at that stage, which would help get into this sort of a business? I'm going to go in alphabetical order. I'm going to go with Ben first, if that's okay. But just a tip or two to help people who are looking to get into the business.
Sure. For me personally, I think the most important thing was I wasn't sure whether I would have enough scientific background. I wasn't sure about a lot of things if I'd be qualified. The thing I would tell myself is just enthusiasm and just excitement, and just being willing to learn. I think they're the three most important things you can bring into this job, because there is a hell of a lot of stuff to learn, and you will be learning until you finish doing the job at whatever time that may be. So just having that excitement and bringing that into an interview as well, I think that always translates better than any qualification.
Excellent. Okay, so Alice, have you got a tip to throw back at these people?
Yeah, so when you're applying to an entry-level job, I know this was a challenge for me. Like, I always feel like I need to know everything before I go into the job. So it's just knowing that you're not going to know everything, and again, to Ben's point, your willingness to learn, and just showing that and expressing that in the interview. But before you get to the interview, I'd say do your research, like look into the different agencies, talk to people, and just look at the culture of the agencies, because that's a big part of it. And make sure that when you are in an interview, you're interviewing them as well, and make sure it seems like the right option for you. Okay,
cool. Charlotte, what are you going to say?
I would mirror both Alice and Ben there, and definitely do your research. One thing I would say, and it might sound a little bit odd, but if you're coming from a project leader into MedComms, Helios is quite meetings focused. So one thing I would say, that might sound quite bizarre, is that organise a meeting, no matter how big, no matter how small it is. If you're doing your undergrad, etc., try and get involved in a society, try and hold a little meeting, and it will really open your eyes to all of the elements that are needed to organise a meeting, whether it's logistics, whether it's AV, whether it's attendees, content, review, communicating with other people to make sure you get to the delivery of the meeting, the timelines, etc. There was just so much in the background to organising something at a congress that I was not aware of, and I would just encourage that.
Okay, all right. I'd like to wrap up, but I'm going to wrap up with a comment from my side, which will cover off some of the comments coming in, or hopefully cover it off for the purpose of this little recorded part, and we can talk about it in more detail when we stop the recording. But we haven't really talked about where you're going, the career progression, and the opportunities and so on. And I think all I'd like to do here is just make the point that the MedComms business has evolved a lot over the last few years. You know, there are big companies, small companies, whatever. You're all very unique, but there's a lot of emphasis now on learning, development, progression of people. There are career structures there. As the simplistic way would be come in as an account exec, you become an account manager, senior account manager, account director, you know, and so on and so forth. You can go up that sort of commercial client sort of facing side of it in the same way as maybe as a writer, principal writer, senior. So there's a lot of emphasis now on supporting people who come in, providing the learning and development opportunities and the career progression. And ultimately, there are people who will go through and set up their own agencies or go and be freelance, and there's all those opportunities as well. And there's a huge opportunity now for remote working, agile working, virtual working, call it what you like. However, I would say, and I'm sort of looking for a nod from all three of you, that if you're starting in a business like MedComms, you want to start in the office. And there are few opportunities to start remotely or part-time or anything. But you get a year or two's experience under your belt and the opportunities are absolutely massive. And hopefully you'll find out much more about that at FirstMedCommsJob.com, where you'll find all sorts of good stuff. So for the purpose of the recording, which is a little bit later than I want to, I'm always a bit caught up in these and we keep going a bit longer than I want to. So I'd like to draw a halt to it. I'd like to say to everyone who's listening to us, thanks, and don't rush away because we are completely happy to be sitting here till the top of the hour. That's not a problem. However, for now, I'd like to say a huge thanks to Ben and Alice and Charlotte. I'd like to encourage you, if you're interested in what they're doing, to connect with them via LinkedIn. They're all very happy to hear from you. And obviously, from my point of view, come back to FirstMedCommsJob, look at more of these resources at FirstMedCommsJob, the events and so on, and the wider picture at MedCommsNetworking.com. So I'm going to stop the recording there. I ask everybody on these meetings nowadays to give a little wave. So would we all just say wave and say bye-bye? Bye-bye.